we're gonna try to do today is keep this under 30 minutes, but I wanted to show you how to make a tree out of the Woodland Scenic products. Now, I'm not here to promote Woodland Scenic. It's just a material that I have, and to be quite honest, it works pretty good. But to start off with, the first thing you need to do before you do anything in a clinic is you obviously need to have some tools. So if you don't have tools, you need to get some tools. And that comes to whether you're doing something like this or whether we're going to a show and setting up. Don't go to somebody else and ask them, can I borrow something? Well, if you borrow something from me, then I don't have something to work with. So everybody needs to have tools. So we're gonna start off very basic today, and these are basic tools that you need. You obviously need a hobby knife, and your hobby knife, for safety reasons, should have a cover on it. And when you get through using your hobby knife, put the cover back on it so that you don't stick your blade in your hand and cut yourself. You need a pair of spruce cutters. I got a little pair of pliers here that I use to bend. You need a pair of tweezers, and you need some other stuff that I'll go through as we go along. This is what your basic armature looks like when you buy it in the pack. And that, maybe if you're looking at it this direction, it looks like a tree. But if you were to put it on a layout and look at it sideways, it doesn't look much like a tree. So when we start off, we're going to take this armature. The first thing you want to do is take your hobby knife, and you got a little scaling on the inside of these branches. So you just want to take your hobby knife and scrape that flashing off. When you're scraping it off, you're cleaning that trunk of the tree up, if you will, and you can hold this thing in certain lights and look at it, and you can see the flashing on that. So if you see that on your branches, just take your hobby knife and scrape it off. Somebody, if you were closer, you would have seen a piece just fly off of here. There's also some casting marks that would be on here, and you can feel those as one right here. You want to take that hobby knife and cut that down so that it's not protruding out. Once you get that cleaned up, you take your little pliers like this, and let's grab the first rail and just take it and twist it. And let's go to the other side, and we can twist that one. Now we can take these branches and separate them out. Simply pull them out. Now we're getting something that looks a little bit more like a tree. So now let's take this and grab the top of it and twist it a half a turn the other way and pull these branches down. Take your top, twist it back the other way, pull those branches down. Now we've created something that looks a little bit more like a tree. Here's one that's already done. I'll pass that around, y'all can look at it. Once you get that done and you're kind of satisfied with the way it looks, the next step you want to do is you want to spray paint it a flat black. Because if you look at that armature going around, it doesn't resemble the bark of a tree at all. So your base coat is a flat black, and which comes in a little spray can. Remember, you just want to cover it lightly. You don't want to saturate it, because if you saturate it, you're going to lose the detail that's in the armature. Once you get that done, and now we're going to start. We would dry brush. And everybody know what I mean by dry brushing?
No.
Okay, when we dry brush, we've painted this armature black. The first thing that I would dry brush it with is a brown. And this is a water-based paint. It's called Autumn Brown. Now I'm gonna put a little brown on here. I'm gonna do one for you just to show you what I'm talking about when I talk about dry brushing. I'll put a little paint in now. I've got my brush here now. A lot of people like different kinds of brushes. I prefer this brush. This is a 1/2-inch brush, and it's got a pretty stiff bristle in it. The reason I like it is I can take it and push it down and kind of round it out at the top. So now I'm gonna take this brush and I'm gonna dip it in my paint. And you can see I got a lot of paint on the end of that brush. Remember, we don't want to paint the armatures, we want to highlight them. So I'm gonna take my brush and I'm gonna dab a lot of this paint off. And you can see what I've taken off so far. Once you think you got enough on, dab it a couple of more times to get a little bit more. And then just start taking and brushing your armature, highlighting it. You can dot it. Remember, we're not painting, we're highlighting. It's done. There's one that you can pass around that's been highlighted. I don't want to give you this one because it's wet.
Thank you.
Clean your brush. Dry it out. Once you get it dry, I brought my own towels back there. Once you get it dry like that, take it and fluff it back out again. Blow those bristles out, because that allows the paint to get down in it, but it doesn't clot up your armature. So let's see, now we gotta get to the next one. And the next one we're gonna use a dark gray. This is called medium gray. All right, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna put some gray paint in here. I'm going to do the same thing. And I'll take the armature that I just did, because you're putting so little paint on this stuff, you're almost drying it out as quick as you put it on. And once again, we're lightly brushing the armature. And this is, remember now, this is your gray. Your first step was to spray paint it black. Your second step was to highlight it with the brown. And now your third step is to hit it with the gray. And if you pass that one around, that one is done. So now you got a whole bunch of armatures painted up, and
You catch like a girl.
you say, what am I going to do next? So you let them dry good, let them set up, and you might say, well, I didn't particularly like this spur here on this armature, so I'm gonna cut it off. Or I didn't want this spur here, so I'm gonna cut it off. So you can take these things and you can cut them up any which way you want to make the tree look like you want it to. You say, well, maybe I want it spread out more. Just bend it, shape it to what you want. Remember, no two trees are the same. They're all different. So what you're creating is something different. If you want it tighter, you want a more compact tree, then push your armatures together. It's this is not a overly difficult task. It's very simple to do. Once you have got your armatures finished up, you use hobby tack. Now this stuff is it's really good and it works good, but you have to follow the directions, because when you take this stuff out and put it on your armature, it's white. Do not try to stick your foldage to your armature when this stuff is white. You've got to put this on and let it dry till it is clear. Once it's clear, you can stick your foldage on the end of these little spurs. And that's what you come up with. And maybe that's not the best looking tree in the world, but it's not a bad tree. And if you put a bunch of them together, compact them up, they're gonna look pretty good. And if you go a little bit further and you were to look at this tree, you would see that there's a dog at the bottom of the tree and there's a cat in the fork of the tree. So now you've created a scene, which is something different. Now there's a number of things that you could do. You could say this house is by a tree, or this tree is by a house. You could have an old car sitting underneath of it with a hood up underneath of it, and a guy with his head stuck over in it working on the car, which if you go back to a transition era, that's typically what you'd find. You might find a chain hoist hanging out of the tree, and that's why the guy did his mechanical work. If the same tree was in a park, you might have park benches around it or picnic tables with people sitting there eating their picnic, or a couple just sitting on a bench doing it. So you can take a tree and do an awful lot of things with it as far as creating a scene on your layout rather than just competing a forest. So we need forests, but we also need scenes as well to grab people's attention when they're walking around their layout.
If you wanted to make that look thicker, how would you go about it?
You would use more hobby tack on it, but they will tell you a lot of the techniques that I'm telling you I got out of the Woodland Scenic instructional manual. I bought one when I was at Amherst, and let me tell you, it's got a wealth of information in it as far as doing all sorts of things from trees to creating mountains, ground foam, you name it, it's pouring water, lakes, rippling, the effects of water. It's all in that book. It's really good. One of the things that they tell you when you're using your hobby tack is to be very careful about where you put that hobby tack at, because wherever you put it, it's going to create a shine. So if I were to put something hobby tack in here, it's shine. I better put some foliage over it, because if you don't, it's going to stand out like a sore thumb. So in this case, I typically chose just to put it on the ends of the trees where you see the little spurs. Each one of those spurs is where you would want to put your hobby tack. And then on top of that spur, you could pull it apart. And then you would take your foliage and it won't stick now because I don't have hobby tack on it. But you'd put that in and you would cover that spur completely with your foliage. Now this is a dark green, they got light green, got multiple colors of foliage. You don't want to do all of your trees in the same foliage. Once again, Does any tree look the same in this picture? No, they're all different. So I've got some armatures here. The only other thing that I would advise you to be careful with, if you use these little pliers here, they got teeth on them. If you take and you saw me twisting those armatures with this, if you squeeze this too tight, you leave a mark in it. So just grab it lightly and twist it. Most of them you can twist with your hand. I'll show you that in just a minute.
Okay, I was gonna ask you about, tell them about that.
This is a base for the tree. Personally, I don't like them, because now, this tree would push down into that base. You've got to secure that, and you've created a ring around that. So now you've got to camouflage it in some fashion. So why not just leave that off to start with? Take your tree and plant it, and put your foliage around the bottom of it, and you're done. Any questions?
Yeah. The paints you use are acrylics, water-based, right?
Yes.
Is it okay to use enamels? Is it just
I
personal
wouldn't
preference?
use enamels because enamels got a shine to them.
Ah.
A tree doesn't, when you go out of here today, you look at trees when you go around. You don't see any trees that got bark on them that's that color. Most of them that you see are gray. They've got a lot of gray in them. Now the reason I did the black was because the black gives it depth. Okay? When you're looking at the tree, the black gives it depth. When you put the browns in it, it could be where some of the bark is broken off of the tree. And the gray would actually represent the natural color of the tree. So those are things that you want to look at. If you were doing a pine tree, obviously you would want to do the colors of what a pine tree would do. Now some people would say, they look at this tree and they say, wow, that's a big tree for end scale. But if you take your end scale ruler and you put on this tree, this one that I have done right here that has the foliage on it, you will find out that the height of that tree is between 65 and 70 feet, which is appropriate size for end scale. Yes?
The spray paint, is that,
It's spray paint. This is just a Krylon paint,
but it's an enamel?
but it is a flat black. They'll tell you in the book, do not use shiny paints, because that will distort the look of your armature and your finished product. And that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to create something that looks natural. It looks like it belongs in the layout. Yes.
Dave, this entire clinic you've been presenting, and we have a tree canopy behind you on the picture, which I think is cool. And obviously in our club layout, we've used a lot of black polyfiber to create a tree canopy effect for forests that are far, right?
Right.
And that tree you're making seems to be near. Have you tried with that tree style, black polyfiber? Have you tried that?
I'm working on that in my home layout. We got a lot of black polyfiber there. Use this tree in various spots around that to highlight that. And the polyfiber, as you see on the brew layout, gives you more of a distance in the layout, whereas your tree itself is more of a close-up as somebody walks along. If you were standing where Daniel is and you look behind him, you see some trees there. If you look off in the distance, you see the polyfiber, and that gives you that distance look with the depth that's in it. And the black gives you the depth that you're looking for. Any other questions?
You might just explain to the new people that not only you get it like this, but you can get clumps, you can get all kinds of
It's
stuff.
just clumps.
Yeah, so you wanna tell them about that?
You get it in clumps and stuff like that. And clumps is what you wanna work with when you're working with armatures. If you're using polyfiber, which that's a whole clinic that I don't wanna get
No,
into
you're good.
today. But you would use a finer product on that to sift over top of it to create the effect.
Dave, you did a clinic for us some years back using wire. Do you prefer this to the wire?
This is a lot quicker. I won't say it's any cheaper. A bag of these trees, in this range, they come 3 inches to 5 inches in height. They're about just a few cents less than $17 for a bag, and it's 27 trees in a bag. So, that's not bad, but now you gotta consider, in addition to buying your armatures and that, you've gotta buy your clump foliage. Like you say, you're gonna have to buy different shades of clump foliage because you don't want all your trees to look the same. So now you've got another little investment there. But let's say by the time you get to, unless you buy the really big bags of clump foliage, by the time you spend $30, you got enough to make 27 trees, so that's not quite $1 a piece for a tree.
Not bad.
Now, you can't, and I'm telling you, you cannot go online and buy ready-made trees that cheap. So, this is a good way to make a lot of trees for what I consider to be a reasonable amount of money, and they will enhance your layout. So I'm in hopes that after this clinic today, that you guys will go out and buy you a bag of armatures, twist them up as you see fit, paint them up, put some stuff on them, and bring them in and put them on the layout, and now you have a vested interest in the layout that's here.
Roger that.
Thank you very much for your
Great.
time.